So let's start slowly. Welcome, everybody. It's great. It's really great to see so many of you, some new faces, some known faces, and some new faces. I'll start sharing my screen to introduce briefly who we are and what we do. So I am Maria Piquer Rodriguez. I work at the Freie Universität in Berlin, but together with Lucia Salvar, who works at the CONICET Institute in Argentina, we are both the coordinators of a working group of the GLP, of the Global Land Program, with the name Social-Ecological Land Systems of Latin America. And you see my screen properly, right? Or you see my notes?
Quite properly, but we see also the next slide.
Again, I have to change this every time. Now it's fine, yeah?
Yeah, now it's good.
Okay, perfect. So together with Lucia, we are coordinating this working group, which today has the pleasure to bring you a presentation on the newly created network of Social-Ecological Observatories for the Andes. And so to give you a very brief overview, I need to find my mouse. To give you a very brief overview of the content of the presentation of today, I will start with an introduction to how this network started. Then Julieta Carilla will continue giving an overview of some of the characteristics of this network. And Lucia Salvar would close the presentation part describing the generation of a map of social-ecological land systems of the Andes, in which variables were used for that. And at the end, there will be plenty of time for a Q&A session and some discussions. And we are especially interested on hearing from you what your opinions are, comments, constructive suggestions that you may have, or willingness to join the network in different ways. So we'll be talking about all of this during the 2 hours we have for this today. So let me start briefly introducing you about the origins of this network, how it started. You can see there a prototype of a logo that we have created, one of the members of the network. And the network is called in Spanish ROSA, because it stands for Network of Social-Ecological Observatories for the Andes, in Spanish, Red de Observatorios Socio-Ecológicos Andinos. And how it was originally, everything started thanks to funding that we got from Future Earth and the European Space Agency for Earth observations, that promoted a series of meetings and funded an in-person meeting that triggered all the collaborations that happened since then. So we generated a concept with all the activities that we will develop under the coordination of the Institute of Regional Ecology in Tucumán, in Argentina, the Nodal Office of Latin America of the GLP, and our working group also played an important role in the coordination, and CONDESAN, Programa de Adaptación a las Alturas, also played an important role in the coordination of these efforts originally. And we embarked in a series of activities that were based on exchanging knowledge, and were organized in 3 modules, mainly a series of online meetings and in-person meetings. The first module, you see everything here in Spanish, but I'm explaining it to you in English. So the first module was a series of 2 online meetings. The second module was the in-person meeting in Argentina that took place in May. And the third module is the outreach of the results that we got so far, which is this webinar that is taking place today. So the first online meeting was focused on presenting a first approach for mapping socio-ecological land systems in the Andes, that we thought it could set the basis for framing existing monitoring efforts in the region that would allow us to detect potential gaps in terms of monitoring socio-ecological systems, but also to understand what, on one side, to understand what existed, what was being done, and potential gaps that could be tackled by this network. And an important part of these presentations was the part that related to potential variables that could contribute to enhance either the mapping of the socio-ecological systems, the monitoring of these systems. And for this, we had the pleasure of having with us Lucia Salva from Argentina, Ferran Gascon from the ESA, European Space Agency, James Thornton from the Geo Mountains, and Carmen Ponce. I am very sorry, I forgot, Carmen, your affiliation right now, but I'm sure Juli or Lucia are going to help me later. Carmen gave us also an overview on social variables that were being used and monitoring in some of the Andes systems. In the second online meeting took place in April, and we had an extensive and broad overview of presentations that related to existing monitoring experiences in the region. We had presentations from Argentinian systems, from Agustina Malicia and Ezequiel Araoz, from Brazil. Well, Laszlo Nagy also presented their experiences and monitoring systems in Brazil and globally, and Camilo Rodriguez and monitoring activities they were doing in Chile, and James Thornton from Geo Mountains, also other monitoring experiences worldwide, such as in Asia, for example, in Asian mountains. And last but not least, we had a third in-person meeting in May in Argentina, where there was again ample space for presenting and exchanging current efforts on monitoring social and environmental systems in the Andes. This was followed by a discussion on this, the variables that could contribute for enriching the monitoring efforts and the mapping of the social-ecological land systems. We did some field trips that allow us to observe directly these socio-ecological systems. And overall, we consolidated the network. We selected some observatories as nodal sites that could basically trigger the or enrich the starting network. And here you see some pictures that were taken during the workshops and the fieldwork that we did there. The current structure of the network will be widely explained by Julieta in the next presentation, but I can at least let you know that the network has a current basis, a directive committee based on advisory, communicating, and financing areas. There's a publication plan, and Condescend offered logistics support and hosting for the network, at least during the first years until the network is financially more established. But Julieta will be explaining in a moment a bit more about this. So I think with that, I leave you with Julieta Carilla. I'll stop sharing and briefly introduce Julieta. She's a researcher. Julieta, meanwhile, you can start your presentation, Juli. So Julieta is a researcher at the Institute of Regional Ecology in Tucumán, and part of the steering committee of the ROSA network. And with that, the screen is yours, Juli. Thanks very much for being here today.
Thank you, Maria. I'm sorry. Sorry. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to to make you know about our creation of this network. And thank you very much for attending to this webinar, which is the last part of 3 modules of this package of the first stages of ROSA. As you know, ROSA is the acronym of, in Spanish, of Network of Social and Environmental Observatories for the Andes. I will present briefly the basis for the creation and consolidation of this network. I will start. You may be asking why we thought in creating ROSA, and well, we had been working in the Andes a long time ago, and we know everybody that social ecological systems in the Andes sustain the livelihood of millions of people and are essential for conserving and maintaining one of the most biodiverse regions of the world, while providing vital ecosystem services. However, despite their critical importance, there is still limited empirical evidence that integrate the social and the environmental monitoring efforts, these 2 dimensions in the monitoring efforts. So it is important to understand these long-term changes that occur at continental scales. Also because the Andes are vulnerable to this environmental change, it is important to analyze and to understand how these systems are spatially integrated, and how they respond, and how they can be more resilient to this environmental change, mainly climate change and degradation, land degradation by unsustainable land use practices. Thus, for this, we think that the availability of long-term social ecological information, such as regional monitoring, is key to understand the processes of the territorial configuration of these social ecological systems. We also observe that there is a scarce participation of different actors in the co-production of the knowledge derived from monitoring, and the social science is generally subrepresented in this monitoring effort. This publication, which was recently developed, identify the state-of-art knowledge gaps and monitoring priorities for a research agenda toward the long-term social ecological monitoring in the Andes. For this publication, we carry out participatory meetings, and we develop this conceptual model of functioning and monitoring of the Andean socio-ecological systems. We also this model presents 4 components, mainly the actors, which are the blue squares, the systems, which is the green one, the orange ones represent the processes that affect these actors and systems, and the red arrows represent the interactions between the components. And what we did was to contrast this conceptual model with existing monitoring efforts that we compile through different sources of information, and we make this map about the distribution of the main monitoring systems labeled with different terms that we assign related to the main monitoring system, of course. And as you can see, we observed from this, we emphasize that the monitoring effort is in fact part of a broader process of social ecological management, in which academia, government, and community should participate by co-design and co-management and participatory management of this monitoring. However, important challenges remain to consolidate this integrated monitoring approach in the Andes, including the consideration of the social dimensions in the long-term research. As well, this is what we can see here in the map, that there are subrepresented the monitoring effort referred to social, environmental, and social monitoring, which are the red and the yellow colors along the Andes. And also it's necessary to consider the participatory or the co-production of this monitoring in this, well, in the Andes, which are represented in this model in the contrast in the feed of this model, that we realize that there are a scarce, or there is a lack of monitoring that produce information with the co-production, meaning of the different actors. There is a lack of governance in these monitoring processes. Well, summarizing this, within this framework, a group of partners organization has proposed to support the establishment of a network of social ecological observatories for the Andes in order to integrate different monitoring efforts into a network or observatories, a network of observatories and or learning sites to generate and share information in a coordinated, efficient way. Make integrated readings of social and ecological changes in the Andes and link this knowledge to territorial management and decision making. Before continuing, I would like to clarify what we call this, our definition of the monitoring site, which is our observatory, where could be the observatory site, which is a series of social and environmental variables are tracked, or learning sites where multiple actors participate and where monitoring is a part of a broader framework of adaptive management of the territory. ROSA adopts both definitions, and an observatory could be the observatory defining or the learning site. In this presentation, I will show you a conceptual and a methodological proposal to take the first steps toward the establishment of this Andean Observatory network that integrates, or at least pretend to integrate, social and environmental monitoring efforts. I will, the presentation is well organized with these titles. I will show you the objectives, the conceptualization of the social-ecological system that adopts ROSA, a methodological approach with the working scale, the criteria for selection of the observatories, the potential variables to include, and the information type of these variables, and then the selected observatories, institutionalization of the network, and the next steps. The different colors try to differentiate the different section of the presentation, like the introduction or methodology and the results. But it's not exactly that. Well, the objective of ROSA, we identified 6 objectives. One is to identify, compile, and integrate the social ecological system monitoring efforts in the region into a publicly accessible network of social ecological observatories for the Andes. We also promote to analyze effects of changes on biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being in representative territories, and understand their variation in different territorial contexts, considering the political, economic, cultural, and environmental context. We also want to generate a space for exchange of experiences and training related to the integration of approaches for the long-term socio-ecological monitoring in the Andes. We would like to maintain an updated communication to foster the science policy dialogue. Also, we would like to promote the integration of the long-term socio-ecological monitoring into territorial management and governance process from the community to and the government at different scales, local, national, supranational. And the last objective to evaluate critically the representativeness of the social-ecological observatories in classification maps of social-ecological land systems, scales for the Andes, identifying gaps and opportunities for the integration of new sites. Well, to define these objectives, we were almost all agreed, but what we took a lot of time discussing was the big question that ROSA would address. One of the most challenging issues in a collaborative workshop is to define an unifying question. The global question should be transdisciplinary, relevant to a broad public. Also, the monitoring should encompass multi-scale, temporal and spatial scales, addressing stages, trends, present, future. Also, the method to address the question should be balanced between synthesizing and deepening. This is related to the number of variables we should include, and also the answers should be, and also the question should be answered through available data. But well, ROSA defined this, proposed this wrapping question, address how the main drivers of changes, socioeconomic, political, climate, land use, influence on diversity, ecosystem services, and human welfare and their effect along the Andes, which is represented here in this graph, in this scheme. An important thing to clarify is their conceptualization of social-ecological systems. ROSA adopts the definition of social-ecological system of these authors, Verburg, and which define the SES as an integrated system comprising social and ecological components and the interactions and feedbacks between these components. It includes the physical and the biophysical, the physical and the social environment, their interactions, also the human population, the institution, and the interaction within and between all these components. These authors also point out that this system is characterized by complex and dynamic relationships between the social and the environmental components. And understand these relationships is crucial for the sustainable land management, also for the conservation of natural resources and human well-being. The complexity and diversity of the social ecological systems can be systematized in this classification scheme. It's a continental classification based on earth science, on land science, and geographic aspects of South American social ecological systems, proposed in these two categories that are considered, and ROSA will consider this category for their proposal. This social ecology, this systematization, this classification is published in this SARVA in this publication by Sarva and Colaboradores, and Lucia will show you after my presentation. These two classifications are the social-ecological regions, which are typologies at regional scales, reflecting dominant land uses, and the other is the social-ecological land systems, which are the CELS, which are typologies that consider main socials and ecological land systems. These present more details and more variables. It includes around 20 variables in about 7 dimensions of cultural, demographic, ecological aspects, environmental, economic, etc. aspects. So, a working tool of ROSA is the development of this social-ecological territorial land system, this CELS, but rescaled for the Andes, using as a starting point these CELS for South America, published by the team of Sarva and Piquet. And why we need this map? We think that this map is useful to define the representativeness of the monitoring sites and detect geographic and thematic information gaps in the long term. Now, addressing the methodological approach of ROSA, one definition or summarize of the methodological approach is that ROSA may function as an ecosystem or community of existing monitoring sites that build knowledge in a bottom-up structure. Describing a little bit this definition, ROSA is intending to function as an evolutionary system that starts from the simplicity and gradually progress to understand the social ecological functioning, the interaction between their components and the processes that determine these components. And this is with the idea to include this knowledge generated by the integrated monitoring of social and ecological aspects into the sustained land management. At the first stage, ROSA adopts this bottom-up approach, meaning that each observatory or each monitoring site will keep its independency. But then in a second stage, the ROSA will intend to expand geographically and also in monitoring terms. This could be like expanding into one monitoring site, adding more monitoring efforts, or including more networks. This is important to mention here because now ROSA, the members of ROSA are the original participants of these workshops, of these 3 workshops. But our idea, and we really wish this, is to open ROSA to other territories, to, for example, Patagonia or other monitoring or nodal sites that we identify more than 20 sites that could be part of ROSA along the Andes. Well, in the near future, the goal is to design common protocols to collect social ecological, social environmental data comparable, to integrate and efficiently integrate this, the monitoring of these 2 dimensions with decision making at all the spatial scales. The type of variables of the nature of variables and indicators that ROSA proposed to contemplate are the local indicators, which are related to field studies and local measurements, for example, related to permanent plots or meteorological stations. Also regional indicators derived from remote sensing, for example, land use changes, statistical government, which are related to mainly to demographic or socioeconomic aspects, other global or regional database that could add in this information at global, at wider scales. And also we think that information derived for citizen science is important to include in ROSA. ROSA proposes to jointly build a conceptual-based model that contemplate the different scales of the analysis and a series of guiding questions corresponding to each of the scales, the landscape, the national, regional, continental. And this can be constructed by the different actors that are involved in the land management. Starting with this conceptual model, we think that we can have this like explicitly show the identifications of the main uses and topographic gradients. Also, we can identify the variables to monitor and the responses of these variables to the main drivers of change, which are the climate, the political, socioeconomic aspects, land use, etc. Another important thing that we discussed during our workshops were the working scales of ROSA. This wasn't easy, and probably this is not the last decision, but until now we propose 3 scales of work, where variables at lower scales can be integrated to higher levels, and where conditions at higher scales determine the context conditions for the process observed at the lower scale. The first scale, or the high spatial scale, is the monitoring plot or stations. This is represented mainly by the permanent plots or by meteorological station, giving information such as plant composition or hydrology or precipitation, temperature, etc., and are representative of the variability of key environmental conditions and ecosystem within the observatory. The other scale is the landscape. Here were monitoring plots and station linked to a given history of use and transformation. This can be like an administrative limit, like a municipality, or could be a natural boundaries, like a watershed. This depends in the kind of monitoring. Usually in the kind of monitoring, like watershed is more related to biophysical monitoring, while municipality or this administrative boundary is more related to social monitoring. The landscapes would include all the monitoring plots, also can give an idea of different gradients, environmental gradients, for example, the elevational gradients, and also it could be an idea of the trends in times about different patterns in different parts of the landscape. And these 2 scales correspond to what we call the Social-Ecological Observatory. The third scale is the regional scales, with comprising several monitoring sites distributed at regional or continental scales, and in terms of the social-ecological land systems, which that is this classification of typologies of social and environmental characteristics of different parts of the Andes, this regional, the regional scale include different cells, while the landscapes is usually in one of these cells. That is representing, the landscape represents one of these characteristics, main social-ecological characteristics. The regional scales is what would be the ROSA network in general. In this first stage of establishing ROSA, we are working, we started to work in these regional scales by rescaling or these cells to the Andes. But now we are giving one more step and trying to make a metadata base of different monitorings in the landscape level. And now, an important thing that we define is the criteria for selection of the observatory site. First, we think that an observatory site should be representative of a main or a wide socio-ecological system of the Andes. Then should have an spatial entity. This spatial entity, as we were talking in a minute ago about the scales, we recommend at this stage now that could be this the administrative scales as a third order, which in Argentina is called municipality, that usually have a good and high quality of information related to demography and socioeconomic aspects. Of course, this is not exclusion, and the spatial entity could be one or several municipalities, or also could include or could be the natural boundaries such as watershed or a mountain range. Also, this monitoring site, we propose that must have good availability of high quality baseline information. These are all these variables that should include, which is a baseline of socioeconomic, demography, and land use, for example, related to urban and rural population, livestock, agriculture, poverty indicators. Also, we expect that this observatory site should have a temporal series of climatic and hydrological information derived from instrumental records, long-term monitoring plots, usually vegetations, and complemented by fauna observatory. Also, history of literature of several aspects, cultural, environmental, archaeological, etc., and agricultural station with accessible and high quality data. Potential, the observatory site should have potential for local co-design and co-management and participatory monitoring associated with the integration of monitoring into governance and territorial planning processes. And of course, we think it's important to the existence of a local research institute or team that are involved in long-term monitoring processes that can give continuity to the network. This is very related to the previous slide, which is the potential variables that we think we can include in the monitoring sites. And well, I think it's not necessary to mention, but are mainly related to climate, hydrology, and the different scales and of them. We try to incorporate a wide aspect or aspect of variables such as biophysicals, demographic, vegetation, disturbance, history, etc. This information type to be included in the observatories is more related to how we can show the information, for example, through a platform or through a web page, all the information that we will generate and we compile. And there is these 6 stages or components, which are the local information from the field monitoring that we were talking about, the statistic information of governmental database, the information derived from the remote sensing, the information derived from citizen science, publication database, and other emerging sources of information. This, as you can see, is very related with a little redundant with the type of variables and scales of variables to including the net. Here, after the assessment of the criteria established for the selection of sites, the validation and consensus of the social-ecological land system for the Andes that we work a lot during the workshops, however, is not finished. And also the identification and the meeting of these responsible and existing monitoring efforts with their responsibles. We identify 7 nodal sites, for sure 6, but I think we have 7. And these are the seven sites are distributed. Well, they are not representing the different cells for the Andes or for South America, but they are representing the different main monitoring groups that participate until now in ROSA, and also the different countries. Starting from the north, we have Mérida in Venezuela. These are the responsibles and the institutions for each group. We have Los Nevados in Colombia, Chocoandino in Ecuador, Loja in Ecuador too, Tupicocha in Peru, Cochabamba, Bolivia, Tucumán in Argentina, and Santiago in Chile. Although ROSA is designed as a bottom-up structure, we thought that coordination is needed to grow and to continue with this idea. So we decided to establish this steering committee conformed by 3 persons representing different latitudinal regions of the Andes. Well, me from the southern part of the Andes, Wanderley Ferreira from the central Andes, and Tatiana Ojeda from the northern Andes. The idea is that the committee will rotary in 1 or 2 years. We have meetings and to try to progress with this idea. Also, this committee is accompanied by facilitators and advisors. These facilitators are researchers that have international connections and are part of ROSA, and the idea is to make a collaborative work with these different institutions, as you can see here, Condesan, GLP, MRE, GMBA. And also, we identify experts or responsibles for different aspects of the of ROSA institutionalization, which is communication, financial, and data infrastructure. We also define this institutionalization of ROSA, which would like to articulate the efforts of ROSA with existing monitoring networks without losing or maintaining our own Andean identity. This articulation, we thought one of these, an example of this could be like, for example, Condesan could function as a facilitator of the platform of the ROSA. Also, we think that the observatory should be linked to institutions with history of Andean studies, and also with identifying responsibles of each of these institutions. This will allow continuity to the proposal. We also identify some key strategies to grow and to make visibilization. One is to elaborate the platform or a web page. Also, the data and metadata management system is needed. For now, we are working in metadata management. And we also would like to identify partners and new observatories to incorporate. And efficient communication strategy is important, and also we need to think in financial sustainability. And just to finishing, the next steps are, well, the publication agenda. We are working on 3 manuscripts right now. One is the description, creation, processes, objectives, selection of nodal monitoring site, etc., of ROSA, which is part of what I'm presenting now. Another one is the development of the Social-Ecological Land System classification for the Andes. And the other one is the book on a special issue, which compile all the description of the ongoing monitoring efforts on the different selected monitoring nodal sites. We also think it's very important to give visibility to ROSA and try to get funding. So we are planning to present ROSA to different scientific meetings. We identified 7 until now from the 3 years. And also now we have this seed money source from Adaptación para las Alturas. And we are working in a list of financial sources that we can apply next from recently. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Julieta. Great overview with lots of details. I'm sure there were some questions and comments in the chat. We'll get to that later, because now we have the presentation of Lucia Sarbar, who's going to be telling us about the development of a map of socio-ecological land system of the Andes. Lucia Sarbar works at the Institute of Territorial Research. I have to say it in Spanish, it's complicated. Instituto de Investigaciones Territoriales y Tecnológicas para la Producción del Hábitat. It's a CONICET Institute in Tucumán. And with that, the screen is yours, Lucia.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, it's a very difficult name for for translating in the real time. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to present this work in progress. I mean, actually it's a work in starting point almost. The development of a map of social-ecological land system for the Andes that Julieta already introduced several times as a spoiler. And I'll be talking in behalf of a much larger group. Almost half of the ROSA team is participating in the development of the map. So what is this? What are the social-ecological land systems? First, let's go to something that we all know. I'm sorry for those people that already saw these slides. I'm going to repeat a couple of things. Here on the left in the map, we can see something that we're all very familiar with, which are the biomes of South America. The biomes describe what we should find in the field, in the territory, when we go and see what are the natural or biophysical features of those territories. But what happens nowadays, it's very difficult to go into the field and find actually those type of environments. In the map on the right, you can see in pink or violet, places that are quite remote or wild, excuse me, where you could actually find territories that resemble to the descriptions in the biomes. But what happens to all the rest, which is very like anthropized, level anthropized in the blue and very anthropized in the grays. These faults appeared in history and they start changing the environment with all their activities and characteristics. And we have modified it pretty much all of the landscape. So if we now want to go to the field and understand what's going on there, we need to include human activities in there. So we propose to make a new map that complements the biomes map or the ecoregions map with also human impacts and modification of the land. So those are the cells. We already developed one map of the social-ecological land system for the whole South America, together with almost 22 authors and other collaborators, and which was published last year. And what are these? The cells are territorial typologies that emerge from a spatial zonification based on a set of social and ecological attributes all combined together. So it's not a classification per se. We are not saying what it is there, but we are saying this piece of this area is more alike to other areas within these same cells than they are to other different cells. So we are identifying places where that are more similar to each other. And well, how is that useful for ROSA? Well, Julieta already mentioned a couple of things. She already started showing a preliminary map. And so we identify having a cell zonification will help on one hand to organize a better integrated network of observatories. Also, it can provide a spatial framework to contextualize our observations. It would allow us to also associate the data we collect in one particular observatory to a larger area, of course, acknowledging the limitations of such extrapolations. It would also help to identify underrepresented areas and try to engage people and put efforts in developing new observatories in such areas, and so forth. So how is this cells gonna work? So far we have the social-ecological land system for South America. So we are trying to develop a more detailed map for the Andes exclusively. And the cells have this nested structure where we already have social-ecological regions, like resemble more or less the biomes, if we want to compare with only ecological classifications, which are subdivided into social-ecological land systems. So from the 5 social-ecological regions, we get to 13 social-ecological land systems. And now we want to go into those social-ecological land systems that are present in the Andes and get more detail and subdivide them in what we call for now subcells, Andean subcells. So we first identified those from the 13 social-ecological land systems, which of those have a prominent area within the Andean region, which are these 6. They have more than 100,000 kilometers within the Andean region. And this is an example of how we could subdivide it. This was a preliminary result to start thinking about that and sharing the idea with the rest of the network, not the refined map, because we are now restructuring everything, as I'm going to tell you soon. So how we are developing this map? The process is very iterative and collective. We start with a group of specialists that in this case is the ROSA network people. And we first of all define a set of variables or features that we understand will help us tell apart the regions and differentiate the zonification. Once we have the set of variables, then we have to go and find the data sets that will help us measure those attributes. Most of them, they have to be, well, available right now. So it's, we have to go and retrieve data from other sources. Some of them we might be able to develop altogether. And we have a set of requirements, and if we don't find a data set according to those requirements, we have to go and revise how we can change the variables list to incorporate that feature in a different aspect, or reorganize how we want to try to describe that aspect. Once we are happy with our database, we go and to the third stage, which is the spatial analysis. We combine all the data together. We subdivide the whole area into equal size grids. For the entire South America, we use hexagons of 40 kilometers wide. For the Andes, we might revise that. So for each of those hexagons, we calculate values for every single variable we have in our data set. And then we can measure the statistical distances between those hexagons in this multidimensional space to try to group together those hexagons that are closer together in this multidimensional space. And that's how we develop the map. We share those maps with the rest of the group to see if those maps capture the collective knowledge we have of the territory. If it doesn't, we have to go and revise again the variables and go through again the whole process. We are now in the ROSA group. We are going through the third round of revisions. It's very iterative, as you can see, and this might not be the final yet. So once we are happy with the maps, we proceed to the fourth stage, which is calculating statistics and try to describe those areas the best as possible, to use that information again through the group of specialists to produce a description and characterization of the social-ecological land systems. The group of specialists here is a very key component, because we acknowledge data is not always perfect, and many times we cannot find information we would like to. So we need to have these collective criteria, and the group needs to be very heterogeneous in disciplines and backgrounds and regions. So we are not missing any part when we are making our decisions. And so the most important thing is to make a map that is useful. Useful in this case for the ROSA group, but in general for people that work in the Andes. So where we are at this process, we are in the very beginning. We are working on the variables and the data sets. These are the variables that we had in the database for the whole South American map. There are 26 spanning across these 7 dimensions. But we are now revising them because some of them might not be relevant for the Andes specific, or we might introduce specific variables that we want that are important for the Andes regions and were important for the whole continent. So through our meetings that we already had online and in person, we discussed about these potential variables that we would like to include. And we are working right now in retrieving data that might represent them and analyzing whether that data sets are representing the variables in a way that satisfies us. The requirements for a data set to be included, they are quite a challenge, because they need to data must cover the whole Andean region wall to wall, with a coherent methodology. It has to have an appropriate resolution that might be different for different variables, but we want it to be smaller than the country level, which is a challenge specifically for socioeconomic data. And well, we will use 2020 as a year of reference, so as close as the year 2020 is better. And suggestions on potential sources for addressing these variables are really super welcome. And well, the variables we are willing to include, some of them we already did, those that have the tick marks, are well, regarding soil, pH, and nitrogen. We got them from Soil Grids Network. An altitudinal range, because we had in the South American map, we didn't have enough detail about the geomorphology. Now we want more detail because, of course, the mountains are important in this area. We improve also our climatic indices variables. Sorry, we are now using the bioclimatic indices from Rivas Martinez. For that, we are using data from Copernicus, from the European Spatial Agency. We want to include agrodiversity maps, potentially from these sources, difficult to pronounce. We also want to include a urban gravity map, a concept that is developed by Ezequiel Araos and his group, which tries to capture the influence of a city in the surrounding area. Different cities might have different influence on the surrounding area. We also want to update our land cover data, which and we will rely on the world cover and dynamic world as well. We want more specificity on wetlands and snow cover because they are very important land covers for characterizing the Andean cells. And we are working with European Spatial Agency, and thank you very much to them because they are really helping us here. We also want to go more specific on mining data. We want to include human capital, which refers to social organizations present in the areas. We want to include a map of indigenous communities. We already wanted to include that in the previous version, but we couldn't get there, and we are renewing our efforts in trying to address that too. We want to improve our political data. We are going to explore a different source that we used for last time. We want to improve also our social indicators. And as I told before, they are a challenge. We might try to combine census data from the countries if we are lucky and we unsuccessful. So also we want to include a map of social environmental conflicts, and we will really like to include some migration data. And I don't want to take more time, so I'm just, please keep in mind this, and if you have any suggestions, please reach out. And that's all for this side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia. Thanks a lot. Also, a great overview on the status where we are in regarding the mapping. And before we start with a Q&A session and discussions, the communication team of ROSA has prepared a fantastic 3-minute video that me very proudly would like to show. It's going to test this before starting. So Lauren, if it's possible, we can give it a try. If it doesn't work out, we can then continue with the discussion.
All right, let's give it a try. Give me 1 second here.
Yeah. So the video is about the network, and it was done when we met in Tucumán in Argentina, and describes what the network is about, but you can also see some background images.
Esta iniciativa propone el establecimiento de una red andina que logre integrar los monitoreos sociales y ambientales existentes en los Andes. Para esto, nuestros objetivos son la elaboración de un mapa de sistemas socioecológicos terrestres que caracterice las distintas regiones andinas y compilar e integrar los monitoreos que existan en los Andes y con este mapa de contexto poder identificar vacíos de estos monitoreos. Bueno, esta red, por sus siglas, la llamamos ROSA, por Red de Observatorios Socio-Ecológicos Andinos. La pregunta macro de esta red es poder entender o analizar cómo las tendencias socioeconómicas que impactan sobre los usos de la tierra afectan o tienen efectos sobre la biodiversidad, los sistemas, los servicios ecosistémicos y el bienestar humano. Y entonces poder hacer...
Lauren, the sound stopped on my side.
Mine too.
Lauren, are you there?
It stopped here as well, the sound.
Ah, what a pity. Exactly when you are speaking, Daniel.
Mm. But it was working.
Maybe
I saw it completely.
maybe we can start it again. I don't know.
Yeah. Lauren? I don't know if she's there.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. You said the sound is not working for you all now?
Now it's not
No.
working.
No, no sound.
No sound, but it was working at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me try and unmute myself. That might be the problem.
Haciendo este tipo de procesos,
Yeah,
uno quisiera ver los
that
resultados
works.
inmediatamente y que tengan impacto inmediato en la toma de decisiones, pero realmente muchos de los procesos vinculados al cambio climático toman tiempo en reflejarse en cambios en la vegetación, en cambios en los servicios o los procesos ecosistémicos como la regulación hídrica, como la acumulación del carbono, y por lo tanto necesitamos tener una mirada de más largo plazo. Además están involucrados, por ejemplo, los ciclos del niño y la niña, que toman varios años. Entonces, realmente separar los impactos del cambio climático de estas otras oscilaciones interanuales del clima es complejo.
Realmente trabajar en red todavía le da un plus a esto porque uno interactúa con otra gente como uno que le gusta, que siente el mismo placer, el mismo gusto por las montañas, las mismas ganas de entender qué sucede, de analizar, de ir al campo, de cuantificar, de buscar datos y de, bueno, sobre todo esto, de entender cómo funcionan los ecosistemas de montaña en una escala, en distintas escalas, ¿no? Escalas locales, regionales, continentales, y eso hoy en día es muy importante, no quedarse solamente en lo que sucede a nuestros alrededores y poder dar un paso más y tener una visión un poquito más amplia de qué pasa.
Entonces tenemos que ir comunicando efectivamente los resultados del monitoreo de manera de que los diferentes actores involucrados en la gestión del territorio le vean la utilidad, participen más activamente y se vaya observando estos cambios producto del cambio climático, del uso de la tierra, cómo se vinculan a cambios en la gobernanza, en los procesos políticos. Y todo eso requiere tiempo, pero es un reto fascinante y por eso pensamos que esto de tener sitios de aprendizaje es muy importante.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. You work well, I think.
Thank you for the communication team.
Thanks a lot. Yes, it was greatly done. Okay, so I think now we have plenty of time to take on some questions first and then continue with the discussion on ideas, comments, suggestions. So the screen is open for questions or comments, suggestions. I cannot see you all. I guess if you raise your hand, or you can also unmute yourself and ask. I took a couple of notes on the naming and affiliations that they were left in the chat. So we will change that and edit it.
Well, I use these minutes until someone wants to speak to say thanks to the financial sources, to ESA. We interact always with Sophie, which was very good interaction. She understands our problems all the time, and we try to transmit her all our motivation with this workshop, and also Future Earth, of course, and all the members of the ROSA network, the members that were at the beginning organizing all the workshops, and the members that are now are part of the ROSA, and we invite researchers, institutions from the Andes who wants to interact or get involved in the network. Thank you.
Thanks, Julieta. I wanted to say thank you and congratulations on launching your network today. And you've already made fantastic progress, and I look forward to seeing it continue to develop and expand. And we'll carry on talking about the snow and wetland data.
Thanks, Sophie. Great. Very good.
Thanks.
I'm sure everybody has ideas or comments about the variables we're using or questions there, or even suggestions. Even if you did not read the list of variables we used, perhaps there's an extra suggestion. We still look and lack enhancing the social data we're using. So if you can contribute in that direction by giving us a suggestion or sending us data regarding the social systems, we'll appreciate it very much. It would be great.
I've already seen mining specialists there. So Nora, we will contact you for sure at some time soon.
Okay, Fausto, I see your raise. You can ask in English or in Spanish, however is more comfortable for you.
Very good. This is also part of the questions that I had. In relation to the presentations I heard, I think we need to develop some kind of standardization in our nomenclature or in defining exactly what we are talking about. It called my attention the fact that other networks that are working in socio-ecological landscapes and seascapes were not mentioned, and that's quite important. I don't know if ROSA aspires to be a network of networks, or is just about individual researchers who want to become engaged in a regional observatory work. My understanding is also very interesting because the definition of what constitutes the Andes is still kind of fuzzy. And according to the map that was presented, I understood that there were significant biocultural heritage that belongs to areas were not represented in the map. And so, for instance, just to mention one example, the Chocó Andean area, it is including the Andean flanks in the west, but no Andean flank on the east was placed in the same category. So again, I am very happy to see the innovation here. I applaud the momentum that you guys have generated into the development of this observatory, and definitely will be much in support of developing this regional network. But my 2 cents here would be, ideally, it will be a network of work in the Andes, so we all speak Spanish. It will be very useful not only for the presenters, but for all the participants to have a Spanish-speaking meeting. And also, please incorporate other groups that are working actively in mountain research areas in South America. That's all. Congratulations again to the group, and keep on going.
Thanks a lot, Fausto. And very briefly, before I give the word to Luis Daniel, so we have struggled with giving this seminar in English. We wanted to open it to a very broad audience as a start, so not only South Americans or Latin America, and that's why we thought, okay, we start with English, but definitely we have been interacting a lot in Spanish, so we hear you there completely. I will be very happy to hear about your suggestions on which other groups, other than those mentioned here, we could and should be including. Truly happy to hear about that. We don't want to leave anyone that would like to participate out. And regarding the areas, we are discussing right now which area to use to define the entire Andes. So the one we show there is one of several. We are aware of that. So if you can also contribute in that sense, send us shapefile, publications, book chapters that can contribute to enrich our discussions and our decision taking, that would be highly appreciated. Yeah.
Yes, of
So-
course. But for me, it will be also a pleasure to share with you those. If you please just send me an email with the address to which I could send so you can distribute to the network. That will be ideal.
Okay, I'll post my email there. But likewise, if you are happy to share about other groups we should and could be contacting, will be also great. Now publicly or to me in my email.
Oh, sure.
I'll write my email, please.
One that I consider critical here is the Satoyama network. This is an international program of the University of the United Nations, deals with the socio-ecological productive landscape and system and seascapes. And we have a group of about 8 Latin American nodes that have been actively incorporated into this network. The Satoyama program is actually managed through an Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Tokyo. And that will be, for instance, a very important contact to reach out and see in what ways both programs or both networks can benefit each other.
Okay, I take note. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Luis Daniel, you rose your hand.
Yeah. No, just to thank Fausto for his excellent comments and say hello to him. And yes, in fact, we didn't mention specific networks in the presentation because, you know, there are many and we didn't want to leave anyone outside that should be included. But, you know, a lot of the people who are working in ROSA are members of the Gloria Andes network that monitors summits across the Andes, the Andean Forest Network that monitors permanent plots in forest. There are other networks like MIREM that monitors invasive species, IMEA that monitors eco-hydrological dynamics in paired watersheds in different countries. So yeah, we need to continue incorporating the key networks that are working on a continental scale. And this one you mentioned, we didn't have in our radar. So thank you very much. And if you can think of others and more social and cultural aspects, which are the ones that are more difficult to identify, that are working with a common protocol across the Andes, that would be fantastic. And the other interesting thing is that we will have a workshop in February that we are co-organizing with MRI. We hope to make it in Spanish, of course, in one of the Andean countries. So we will keep you posted on that. We still don't have a place where this will happen, but for sure it will happen in February. And the idea in this workshop is to bring ROSA together with other networks that are working like on glaciers, on hydrology, on social aspects, so that we can start to integrate different people that are looking at the Andes with a continental perspective and with a long-term perspective, and that have an interest in consolidating long-term learning sites. So I guess that those are the key requirements to integrate, is to, to have a focus on a specific site or on a network of sites and have a long-term perspective in terms of monitoring. So yeah, we are super happy to continue the interaction and to explore other researchers or institutions that we haven't identified yet. So thank you very much.
Okay. There's a question in the chat about the references of the ROSA article, the presentations that Julieta did. And I think that's why Julieta is sharing her slides again.
I'm sorry, this is what you're asking?
The first papers, the one on the themes that you showed, I guess, your earlier slides.
I think it's also the one on the state of the art of monitoring in the Andes, but probably if you can show the complete reference.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know, can you see it here?
The upper one, the long term.
I can copy the reference in the chat. So
yes, I'm sorry,
yes,
I saw that slide. So I will copy, yes.
Thanks. I also see in the In the chat, Francisco's writing that they developed also a project in the coastal valley and Andean landscapes, considering this principle of the Sotoyama initiative, with a link there. Great. Thanks a lot. We also take note of that. Very much appreciated. Okay, yeah. There we have the reference from Julieta. Okay, Julio, I see you raised your hand. Spanish or English is fine.
Yes. Okay. Congratulations to the organizers and the steering team of ROSA. It's a huge effort, and I can only imagine your headaches with trying to, herding cats and gathering data. Oof. I have a couple of comments. We have seen the variables, right? But at least in my researcher's mindset, variables come after the questions, right? You choose the variables because you are expecting to get data to answer something. We are not seeing the questions here. We just see the variables. And I think it would be interesting to maybe show us some of the questions that you are thinking that you will get answered by this. I know it's a monitoring network, right? So you are just tracking variables, indicators, hopefully processes, but at the core of a social ecological systems are the interactions and the relations or the processes that are connecting social and natural subsystems. So ideally, the variables are not just going to be on one domain, either natural or social, but they are going to be able, somehow we're going to be able to connect whatever the data is telling us from, I don't know, pH on soils. There's a reason why you are collecting pH on soils, because you think that somehow connects to the social domain, and that there's a process there that helps us to explain what is the social ecological system. And we don't see that in the presentation. Because I read what some of the experts are there, I imagine that, but it's not explicit. And I would like to see sort of behind the curtain, right? What is what you are thinking? And it's not only because I'm curious, but also because when we explicit the questions, we also, in a way, are able to see, what is called the dark side of the moon. What are the questions we are not asking? Right? What we are missing, or what processes that have been, let's say, historically neglected by researchers, we are in a way reifying those missing and those gaps. And let's be honest, science and research is not neutral, and it's so I think we have to be careful in terms of saying, hey, yes, we are consolidating and refining certain questions and aspects, and we might be missing these others, and we know that we don't know these things, and we think effort should be made to illuminate these other sides, to understand these processes, to get variables about this, that, and the other. So because there are marginal populations in the Andes, there are a lot of processes that are, not very well known. So I would like the network, ROSA, I would like to push ROSA a little bit that onto help that, if it's possible, if it's within the purview of the network. And feel free to tell me, no, Julio, that's beyond what we want to do. So it's fine too. The second point is, I understandably so, I noticed an emphasis on quantitative data, but relationships, interactions, and influences are not only by process that can be quantified. Land use change is hugely shaped by policies, right? All the way from government policies to land zone and the municipal level. And I think I missed that in the list of variables. And again, this might be because there's certain bias in how we're thinking that the social ecological systems are connecting the natural and the social realms. So I'll stop there. I see Luis Daniel is gonna say something. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, please, Daniel, sure.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody else from the network wants to answer. Yeah, we discussed this a lot, Julio, in the workshop in Tucumán. It's really difficult to come up with a set of questions that are broad enough that allows, the different observatories that we already have in the Andes come together and integrate. But I guess, if you wanted to give an initial umbrella of what is it that we're interested in looking at how climate change and land use change, driven by all of these governance, institutional, political, economic processes, driving changes in these Andean landscapes, impact biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human welfare and their interactions, and how this links back to changes in the institutional framework, the governance framework, etc. So that would be the general question, and then we want to understand how this is modified by different socio-ecological contexts along the Andes, in which you have different land use histories, different climates, different landscape configurations, different environmental conditions from Venezuela to Patagonia. So the heterogeneity is the largest in the world. So yeah, we need to keep it wide and broad. And then I think the two tasks that we have to continue working on, and we hope to meet again and continue developing, is then to develop different questions, thematic and based on the different scales. What can we answer in an initial approach at the continental level? What can we answer at the landscape level? And what can we answer at the local level? And the other challenge there is that you also want to incorporate the questions that people that live in these territories have. And these questions could be similar between the different sites, but they could also be very different. So, we are still struggling in how to accommodate this heterogeneity of local questions that people, municipalities, farmer organizations might have also at the local level, so that we can build from the bottom up. And I guess as we progress in the observatory, we can start to collect these questions using participatory methods. And one interesting thing that will emerge from that is to compare them, to see if the questions that a farmer has in Venezuela about his territory and the future of these territories are similar to the questions that an inhabitant from a suburban area near Santiago or in Tucumán has about the future of land, of changes in social and ecological dynamics. So yeah, it's a complicated thing. And I think the other thing is that we also want to work, and this is an invitation, on developing a conceptual model that can guide the dynamics of the network. We think this is fundamental. We have an initial proposal in the paper that we put the reference in the chat, but we need to keep working on this, refine the model, and also make it more relevant at different scales. And yeah, as you mentioned, this is kind of an exciting headache that we got ourselves into. So thank you for your comment.
Maybe Lucia would like to add something on some specific variables or missing variables, or not sure.
I thought Julio was more pointing at the monitoring variables, which might not be the same as the variables we use for the mapping. But in case you are interested in the variables we are using for the mapping, we are interested in incorporating qualitative data, and probably social data will likely be represented in some aspects in qualitative data. Actually, our methods allow for a mixed type of data, and in our previous version for South American continental cells, we used two variables that were actually qualitative data. So we are open to that. The challenge is to find a way to represent the features we are interested in, we want to capture. And that's that's an open challenge. We are being creative and trying to go around the difficulties and limitations of what is available. But we are there. So any ideas, as I said, are welcome, because I think we need to work together, especially for building the information that is not out there. If it's not there, it's because it's not easy at all. So, or maybe we didn't ask those questions before. So I open the invitation to suggestions again.
I just wanted to add one thing that I forgot on the second part of the question by Julio, that we completely agree with you that there are qualitative processes of power relationships, institutional dynamics, etc., that won't be easy to capture with quantitative data. And that's why we are proposing to start the work on the network by doing this book, selecting 7 or 8 observatories that already have a tradition of research and trying to look initially at the environmental history of each of these sites and put the monitoring that has been done in the context of the social processes that have been going on in each of these sites. And we're hoping that from the bottom up, we can build a common approach by looking at these 8 case studies from Venezuela to Argentina and trying to see, how can we integrate these different land use dynamics, histories, monitoring efforts that have been carried out at the site, etc. What's the picture that emerged at a continental scale from comparing these 8 sites? So that's why we're starting from this book, in which we can do a more narrative initial presentation of each of the sites and collect what do we know about the sites and where do we go from there. So yeah, just to complement on that aspect.
Okay, so far, very good comments and discussion. I know it's time, we are now an hour and a half with presentations and discussions. Cody.
Yes, one thing to reinforce the things that Luis Daniel said is that me and my team and most of the ROSA members are more specialized in the biophysical monitoring, and for us would be a little, for me, I will talk about me, a challenge to open or to think about boundaries, not natural boundaries of monitoring like a watershed or a mountain range. And the idea to incorporate these municipality or administrative scales is to try to standardize or rescale the social or the statistical governance information that we can use, which is the main drivers of what we are measuring as biologists or ecologists. We are measuring like how vegetation change or indicators of land use change or indication of ecosystem services. But now, in my case, I want to integrate this information, which are more than indicators, maybe are the data itself, which are the drivers of this change. And well, that's I think that's a challenge, and we are working on that idea.
Yeah, that's also an important challenge that we're facing, the definition of the Andes area, but then also which scale we compile data that is useful for the monitoring and or for the mapping. So there are cross scales challenges there. And plus, there's a great availability of biophysical data against the socioeconomic data, and both are prepared at different scale levels, also level of resolution, with the biophysical data having very high spatial resolution and the socioeconomic data coarser resolutions, spatial and temporal resolutions. So then the integration of all these multi-cross scales and temporal scales is a huge challenge. But we have also very good technical people being part of the network. So we will get there. Being creative, as Lucia said. Yeah, thanks to Luis. Daniel also shared an important source of and social environmental data for the Andes that it currently exists. The website is there. I'm also writing it down again. Julio, please. You're muted.
Yep. Yeah, I think we all here have suffered for the multiple problems with data, right? It's something that, and I'll be happy, recently I'll be happy to be part of the, if you want to invite me to the conversations about the frameworks, right? Because I think that's important. Not only because of I really like to discuss these things, as you probably know, but because that makes explicit what we're thinking, right? And it puts on the table all the assumptions and our preferences and our biases. So I think that's a very good exercise in terms of sort of like even transparency in letting us know what we are missing and why what we're missing is relevant and important. So in terms of variables and things that we want to I think we can try to incorporate, I'd like to bring more what I would call the political economy aspects of this, because those are huge, for me, those are huge drivers of change, right? I would argue that even more powerful and more pressing for the population in the Andes, right? So global demands, international markets, and those are not necessarily going to be located in the Andes, right? That will give us a leg to stand when we want to talk about telecouplings. So I think we can be missing an opportunity if we let those out. I don't want to, I think you have enough on your plate, but just, I'm offering more questions than answers. And the other thing is, something that might be relatively easier to start getting at is data on infrastructure, right? Because all those international flows of minerals or whatever you want to export from the Andes, those need certain networks of roads and infrastructure like storage and ports, and all of that exists. The countries have that because the ways in capitalism has developed now needs a standardization on that. So I think that can give us another set of variables that are beyond the conventional demographics and all of that, and it can link the Andes beyond the Andean countries. So just want to say that before I forget.
Regarding data on or variables, Lucia, I see you unmuted yourself. I guess you can add to that, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that indeed the telecouplings is a really relevant aspect to consider while looking at changes in land use, and it's a nice and a very interesting point of a starting point to try to capture that is look at the infrastructure. We did a little bit of that for the South American cells map. I don't know if you're familiar with accessibility map of cities that measure the travel time to the nearest city. We did that for ports, but only ports. We didn't look at all the rest of the infrastructure that is important for different commodities, different type of infrastructure too. And that's right, it might be available. So that's thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, also like we could think on developing something similar. So we had like travel to cities to capture, for the South American example, to capture the accessibility of regions in that sense, infrastructure was included because the trains and roads were there, ports also. We could think on, not on storage, and yeah, so storage for agriculture, but also for minerals, I could imagine. I don't know if it's something for minerals, something like that exists. No, I'm not an expert on that. Fausto, please.
Yes, thank you. Just following up with Lucia's, it's very interesting that we are expecting to do some monitoring work in order to prepare ourselves for future scenarios, getting to know what has happened in the recent past or in the present. However, in biocultural diversity, we are immersed in discussions about ancestry and how these old settlements have really modified the landscape. A big discussion now in ecology is about ecological legacies, criticizing, for instance, that the Amazon tropical rainforest is actually a manufactured landscape. And you see examples in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Colombia. And this is something that is not taken into account in current discourses about scientific monitoring. So if in your map you can incorporate the locations of significant ancestral areas, I recall, for instance, the video clip that you show identified Quilmes in Argentina. And that is something that you should highlight tremendously, because a lot of what's happening today has been happening before. And therefore, in our monitoring of the socio-ecological landscape, we should incorporate these archaeobotanical or even in general archaeological insights. That's just a concern that I have listening to what you are interested in mapping out. Thank you.
Very nice suggestion, I think. Yes. By any chance, do you know a global source, or at least for the Americas, that we could be looking at, where to extract data from?
Definitely. The Florida Technological Institute, they have a fantastic center for neotropical paleoecology, and they are doing a lot of work incorporating palynology data in reconstructing paleoenvironments. Professor Mark Bush, for instance, is, I think, the world authority on Amazonian Andean settlements, and they have these records of how people have affected the landscape composition and structure that is manifested today. So I think it will be a good idea to start from there.
Thank you very much, Fausto. That's really interesting. One challenge sometimes is that, as you said, this is the Neotropical Institute. The Andes is going all the way down to the Patagonia, so we need to find a way to capture the features in an homogeneous protocol. I mean, to not incorporate a regional bias. So maybe we could take from that as a starting point, and maybe to the future we could all work together, try to fill the gaps. I'm not sure what your disciplines are in general. I'm not talking to Fausto only, but in general. But maybe also ROSA networks want to do that, to fill the data gaps. And but it's very important to have a starting point or something to identify how to address these questions. The palynology, I think it's great. It's a great tool.
This is, sorry, just a reflection of what I said originally in my reaction. We need to standardize the terminology and the definitions available for us. For instance, about the Andes region or ecoregion is so fuzzy now that you can point it out, the difference between the neotropics and the Andes del Sur in Chile, for instance. There is a very big difference within one's own country. In Peru, for instance, you have several what you can consider Andean landscapes. And so I think the great contribution of this ROSA network would be to really identified how the socio-ecological landscape has been produced, not by mimicking or replicating the biophysical or biochemical indicators of soil, water, or air, but truly incorporating the social, such as, for instance, cultural ecosystem services that have not been mentioned here. We have not been talking about tourism impacted areas. And much worse, we have not incorporated the ancestral viewpoints, the different scientific approaches to understand nature, particularly from the original people. Los pueblos originarios have a way different way to approach a mountain, for instance, and therefore, if we look into the socio-ecological system of a mountain in the Andes, it will have to start by looking at the local vision of a mountain from the original people. That's my concern, is the greatest contribution of ROSA will be to highlight that emphasis on the social factors, but not only social, but the cultural factors that have been traditionally associated with ecology. Thank you, Lucia. That's a very good point.
Yeah, just to mention that maybe one approach that we could use to go into the history of the site might be the diversity of languages. I know there are some maps of diversity of languages for the Andes, and this could be a way, of understanding, for example, the toponymics. It's always super interesting as you travel through the Andes that the names of the places have completely different origins depending on where you are. Some are Chibcha, some are Quechua, some are, I don't know, Aymara, some are, so, if we could try somehow to map this, to characterize each of the observatories, that might be an interesting, it's only a starting point, but it could give us a gateway into the history of the place.
Very good. I think, Luis, you have touched to the point. Many geographers know that the only commandment of geographers is know thy word. That was expressed way back by Carl Sauer in developing the morphology of landscape. But this is true. We have challenged the notion that Andes itself is a misnomer. And if you go into the onomastic of the different places, it's not just toponymy, but it's also emotonymy and many other ways to identify places in different languages that brings about the identity of the place, which is something that in a sociocultural or socio-ecological aspect is, I think, the starting point. So I'm in agreement completely. Luis, you have mentioned something that is a sine qua non. If we are into this, we have to incorporate the vernacular descriptors of the landscapes. Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So I wrote down archaeological sites and diversity of languages, toponyms. We need to find out where to get this data from, but very interesting. Also on infrastructure. This is easier to find. This is great. Very, very great contributions, I think. Okay, we have 7 minutes left. In case anyone else would like to share any other thoughts. We've been hearing thoughts on concerns, but difficulties or limitations that some of us are facing because of the different working arenas where we are doing our research. Petra, please.
Hello, do you hear me well? Yes?
Yes, very good.
Yeah, super. I wanted to ask Fausto, we do not met personally, but I have find a map of original, the pueblos originarios de América, but I have to look at it because it seems to be very broad, and I was wondering if I could ask you sort of help for the Andes region to just check if the map is representative from your point of view of this crucial point you have mentioned, the vision
the original vision of the mountains the people had in the Andes. So I wonder if I could get your email and maybe we could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, let me put that in the chat here. I just want to tell you that I just sent a chat message to Luis in relation to an international organization, is an NGO based in Canada. It's called Terra Lingua. The whole dynamic worldwide about incorporating languages as part of the mass extinction that we are actually experiencing this time is thanks to this group. Terra Lingua developed the most comprehensive repository of the information about languages in the world, and they have a fantastic collection of papers related to individual languages of South America, in reality of Latin America overall. So most definitely, if you don't mind, let me put this in the chat, and I will send my email contact here. I will be more than happy to interact with you guys. Happy to help to move forward this very important initiative. I am 100% in favor of developing this new approach of a study of mountains from the transdisciplinary science of montology. And so, Lucia, for your information, I am a montologist. And I will leave you to go and check what the montology is. But in reality, this is what I aspire for all my colleagues and friends from Latin America, to look at the mountains not just as this physical edifice, but this is a sentient landscape. You know, this is an area we live with, not we live on. And so eventually this is the work that you are pursuing precisely commutes with this ideal. So I am sending right now my email. I will be very happy to interact with you guys as needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fausto. This is great. Okay. So you'll be hearing from us, Julio and Fausto, I'm afraid. You offer your help, and we're really happily taking it. Julieta, Julio, you unmuted yourself. You wanted to say something?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, the only thing is that I was asking Petra for private. This is the map that she was talking about, that I put it here in the chat, which is a map from the GMBA. But I think that she's going to
yes.
interact with. No,
See, yes, that's the map.
Okay, Petra, perfect. Is there any final pressing question or comment? Otherwise, I also put in the chat my email, Lucia's emails, and Julie's email. So feel free to contact us if you prefer doing it privately or with any other comment or so. Then I think we're good to go to close the session of today. It has been great. I think I've learned a lot. It has been fantastic contributions, comments, and suggestions. Thanks everybody for making it until the end. I know many other people had to leave because of all the commitments, but you have our contacts there. You know, you can also contact us via Condesan. If not, they are supporting and hosting also this initiative. I don't know if Luis Daniel, if there's a official email from Condesan that you could also share relatively fast. Otherwise, our emails are there. This webinar, future meetings, Julio, actually we have an email list, and so we can add you into the email list. There are future meetings scheduled for the mapping of the cells. Definitely, we're gathering variables now. And we said, I think mid-July, we wanted to finish gathering variables and then meet again to look at variables which are feasible for using for the mapping and so. And there are all the meetings at different levels for the publication activities that Julieta presented as well. So if you're happy, we can include you in this email lists that we have, so you are aware of these future activities, and we can take it from there. Yeah, so Luis Daniel also shared his email at Condesan, Juli also. So this session is being recorded. In a couple of days, it will be posted at the website of our working group at the GLP. I don't know if you are members already or not, but if you become members of the GLP in our working group, you will get newsletters and announcements of future activities, webinars of our working group and the entire GLP. So that would be great also to stay in touch for other activities we may be doing. And Lauren kindly posted the link to the working group. Thanks a lot, Lauren. Yes, so I think with that, it has been great. We look forward to seeing you in different moments again. Yeah, fantastic. So have a good morning, afternoon, depending when you are, rest of the day, and stay well. Yes, and thanks to the GLP, definitely, for this space. Take care, everybody.